Call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Education, Township High School District 208. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mary Ann.
Mr.
Roll call.
Goodman,
Here.
Ms. Ruska, Mr. Jepson.
Here.
Dr. King.
Here.
Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Mr. Welch. Mr.
Here.
Sid.
First item, discussion information items.
First person we have tonight is our the CFO from the Township Treasurer's Office, Mr. George Shrimpus. Did I say that correct, George?
Yeah.
Okay. George is going to just touch on the Township Treasurer's Office, and then he also will be open for some questions from the Board of Education.
Hi. I don't know how to just pass this around. When I was here last year, I did hand out a document which really kind of just outlined the mission statement, players in the office structure, the district served, and our services provided to the different school districts. I won't kind of go over it again unless you have a question. It's the same document that we had from last year. Really hasn't changed. So if there is any questions, I'd be glad to entertain it after you've had a few minutes to take a look at it. What I'd like to touch on a little bit tonight is the audit report that you do have, that Tim has sent to you. Again, we are audited annually, just as you are. Coincidentally, we have the same auditors, Evans, Marshall, and Pete. The document that you have, if you look at our audit, it states that the statements are fairly stated and that there were no material weaknesses in internal control at our office. And I think that's an important point. Just a couple other quick comments. Last year, we distributed $1.4 million in interest income to the school districts. And for School District 208, you people received $71,121, which was a 23% increase from the prior year. An additional $13,337 of interest income came to this school district last year versus the prior year. And on the expenditure side, your proportional share of the expenses went down by approximately 30%. The prior year, you were charged back $80,000. Last year, you were only charged $56,000. So that was a 30% drop in the expenditures, and the Township Treasurer's Office had a 2.3% decrease in total expenditures, actual to actual. So I think it was a pretty good year. When your expenses go down, your revenues goes up. This year, I think we're about 10-12% ahead of last year's interest income. So hopefully, if things hold, you'll be receiving some additional dollars on interest income this year. But I think that's a couple important points. When our auditors were in, we had no comments in our management letter. I'll just bring that up. We had none. And we had no difficulties in working with our auditors as far as questions or answers or tasks that they needed or information that they needed. So that's all I really have to say about the audit. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to entertain them.
Is there anything you want to add? Wasn't there a problem with some
Right.
fund speed? I think that should be addressed.
Yeah, if we have no questions about the audit, the next question, the Board of Education, I forwarded them. Recently, the school districts received, not the Finance Advisory Council received the email that came out this week, but there was an email 2 weeks ago from the Financial Oversight Panel and District 209 regarding one of the investments from the Township's Treasurer's Office with IMET. And then the company that they were investing in was a fraudulent company, or that someone went bankrupt.
Is that me?
Yeah, maybe, okay.
I have some questions about,
overall
Yeah.
operations.
I
Yeah.
didn't know,
Those are two
it's
things we
unclear
need to
how the
hear.
presentation is going. I had the impression you were done talking completely. Was that your intent?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
I'm open for
And I'm a
questions.
little surprised that you didn't address a notice we've got of a problem with some investments.
I never received that email.
The-
Are you talking
So
about
the
the
school,
email?
the school districts that serve that are served by the township
Okay.
treasurer's office received an email about 2 or 3 weeks ago updating us on a FOIA request that was sent in from Proviso High School District and their financial oversight. And that there was a concern because the township had invested several $1 million, along with other municipalities,
IMET.
through IMET, and into a company that was then found fraudulent.
I guess I have a bigger question. What communication did you send out to the school districts when you became aware of the problem with IMET and its Florida investment?
All right.
What did you send out to
We-
the school
we-
districts?
We sent out no information at this time, because right now there is no loss.
Okay, how much money, we have District 96, 95, 208 representative, how much funds do they have here in your township?
In the township,
Yeah.
depending on
Do
what,
you think it's irresponsible to at least inform the financial people that, yes, there were investments associated with an organization that potentially invested in a Florida company that potentially may have a loss, may not have a loss, but be aware of it and make sure your constituents are aware of it?
let me just make a comment about that. When this didn't occur until October, okay, that we were notified, okay, from
It's
IMET.
January now.
I understand.
Okay.
When we received the information in October, I sat down with the treasurer and we discussed what the ramifications are and read through what IMET sent us, okay? At this time, okay, I'm gonna repeat this, at this time, there is no loss of money. Can I just kind of explain what happened here? Because I think you gotta look at the whole context of what happened, okay? What happened is IMET, through its investment advisor, Pennant Management, repurchase agreements which were purportedly USDA guaranteed loans, okay, through an approved lender of the USDA. Now, under the Public Investment Act, that is a legal investment, okay? If, in fact, the USDA had issued these loans, we wouldn't be having this conversation. There would be 100% guaranteed, and there would be absolutely no problem, okay? So, when IMET purchased these loans, they were under the assumption, because when they talked to their financial advisor, that the paperwork was correct, and it was in the order that the USDA submits these loans to outside parties to purchase. So on the surface, these documents look legal. And the only reason why it was caught is because Pennant Management's auditors did a very good job and said, I think I'm going to confirm this with the U.S. Department of Agriculture because they're the issuers of the loan. When that came back, the U.S. Department of Agriculture said, we never issued these loans. So what we have here is an individual who not only forged a U.S. Department of Agriculture's signature, a director, onto these documents, and then sold them. And Pennant Management at that time thought they had a legitimate document. The first step that Pennant Management did in October is they went back and submitted to the U.S. Department of Agriculture a request to be refunded the money. And their assumption was, look, you approved this company as a lender of your loans. We think you should hold us harmless and repay it. They were pretty confident that they were going to get the money back. Well, the U.S. Department of Agriculture came back and said, no way. We are not honoring it. We never issued these loans. Okay? So at that time, IMET said, we will just take these funds right now and we're gonna put them into a restricted account to your credit and you will continue to earn interest on them. The only thing you didn't have is you didn't have access to the funds. But the funds were still under our name and earning interest. So based on that, that's the reason why the treasurer said, I don't think we need to put anything out at this time because there is no loss. There's a restriction of funds, but we haven't lost anything yet.
So you're guaranteeing us we're not gonna have a loss?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, then why
I
didn't you
can't-
communicate out to us how much dollars we have associated with IMET? How much is it up for potential loss, even though there's no loss now? What was the communication to tell each of the districts this information?
I understand your position, but I'm just saying to you, when I spoke to the...
You're not guaranteeing me that we're not gonna have a loss.
I get, and
So
you-
then why
and you
don't you
cannot-
communicate
sir,
out the
and you-
potential?
And you cannot guarantee that we are gonna have a loss.
So why don't you communicate out how much is at risk?
You could say how much is at risk, but what if I say a number and I'm totally incorrect?
So you don't know how much you have in IMET?
Yes, we do. We know how much we have in IMET,
So why don't you communicate that out to us?
because I don't know how much, you could lose zero, or you could lose it all. And in talking to...
It should be fair to the
And-
taxpayers whose money it is to understand the potential risk.
But I guess you...
I guess I can go to your website and see the investments.
I get-
What's your website?
We don't have a website.
Why not?
The treasurer hasn't put one up.
I think what Gary's trying to point out is, you give us basically smoke and mirrors kind of report about how great the services are, and we don't think the services are great, okay? We tried to get reports from you last year, get things made public, and it took a while to get them, right, Tim?
I'm sorry, what reports did you ask for?
What
that
did
you
we
couldn't
ask for
get?
last year that took a while to get?
We asked for the audit last year, and George sent it to us after it had been approved by their board.
Okay.
So
I
it took
think
a
that's
while.
normal protocol.
Well,
I wouldn't expect him to give me his
you know,
audit prior
or
to
even
you
so the
approving it.
public knows.
Pardon me?
You talked about our expenses going down, our interest going up. Didn't our interest go up because we had a lot more cash to invest?
Well, that's part of it, sure.
Because we had a
But also-
one check for a certain big dollar amount that they take right off the bat, irregardless of how many transactions it's associated with. It's associated with total revenues, and they take a percentage of total revenues. So even though we had one transaction for 8.9, they took a percent of it. So if you ask them what the net impact of the district was, it was a net negative, right? Interest was how much, and how much was your fee
1.4 we distributed back.
of interest?
Yes, to all the districts.
To
How about our
us.
case?
In your case, it was $71,000.
And how much did you charge us the other year?
56.
85.
Pardon me? No. This year, you received 71,000. You were expensed 56.
And the year before?
The year before, I don't have that number, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm only talking current year. So you had a net positive this year,
This
But-
year.
and you should have a net positive this year.
Yeah, but when you talked about our interest and expense going up, and you're saying, there's no, this is anecdotal. You ain't able to support the fact that you're doing better than we could do on our own. I mean, if we ask Tim to take the 8.5 million and invest it, there's no knowledge that we wouldn't be able to invest it at or near what you're invested without. And you also charge your fee to us based on how much money you hold, right?
Revenues,
Revenues from the prior year, right?
yes,
So
that's correct.
automatically, we get an 8.5 million payment that, again, as Gary points out, really no extra work for you. The way you're saying it, our fees went up. So we have no, besides anecdotal.
Your fees went down.
The
The
year
money
pri-
charged back to you this year went from 80,000 down to 56.
Because it's based on the balance of funds we give you, right?
No.
Or that you're holding.
Based on the revenue.
No, it's
I
not
mean,
based
the
on
It's
revenues.
based on revenues. And our revenues were down this year.
And your revenues were down this year
So
because
our
if you
expenses
remember
were down.
last year, you changed the way you recorded property taxes.
Right.
This year, now it's smoothed out.
So again, that doesn't provide, we change the way we account and our revenues go up, our revenues go down. The question is, you give us reports on a system that I don't even imagine there's a handful of programs in the whole world that can even program the system anymore. It's from the 80s or 90s or something. So when we asked Tim, can we get other reports? Can we get it in other formats? Well, what's the name of the system?
DCR.
DCR. I mean,
What?
there's no modernization.
Can I say something, Tim? If you need a report, or Tim needs a report, there's two ways to get it. Number one,
You told us this last year.
oh, I'm sorry.
Do you use a DCR system that's like 20 or 30 years old?
The system is old as far as the software goes.
Right.
But I think when you're talking functionality, it could really basically do anything you
Well,
want.
if we're providing a service, why don't you give us the functionality? Why give us
You-
reports that
you
they don't
got
even
it.
put all the fields and everything?
Tim, one of the programs that we have is called Relativity. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No, I'm not.
But, okay, Relativity is really an Excel-type spreadsheet. And you have the ability, when I say you, Tim or a staff, has the ability to go in there and pro forma reports in any way you want. That's all you have to do is say to Tim, I want a report that shows the number of students by grades, or however you want it.
You don't have that data for us, do you?
Pardon me?
Do you keep the student data for us?
No, I don't think, student data, you don't have, but I'm saying financial reports. You can format any financial report you want, in any format that you'd like. It doesn't have to be a package. That's what the ability of Relativity gives you. It puts the power of the user to format the reports in the way they want it, in the detail, and it goes right into the database and sucks the information right out. So there's no rekeying. It has a lot of functionality, and a lot of districts do not use it. I don't know why.
It's not
It's-
necessarily user-friendly, George.
It might be not, you know what, Dr.
We've tried when they stopped.
Kevin, you could be, I understand that, yeah, I don't think it's
Or
the most
if we're paying you
friendly.
all this money, why don't you ask us what kind of reports we want and give us what we want?
Well,
Why can't you do that if you have
Tim,
this great
If
system?
if you would like to just suggest to me what you want and in the format you want and what data you're looking for, I think we could do it for you. I mean, I can't,
I've been
I
asking
don't-
for 4 years here.
I don't know what you've been asking for.
Okay.
I mean, do you want the column, do you want it by year, do you want it by function, do you want it
Well,
by?
the simplest one is just providing all the codes you use, a description of all the codes.
That could be done. I mean,
Lots of things can be done.
well, yes, and it's all you have to do is ask. You tell me what you want and sketch it out on a piece of paper, and we'll put it together. I don't know how much, I don't know how much
Well, I'm
easier I
just
can
gonna
make
tell
it
you,
for you,
I-
Tim.
I'm struggling, and like Gary said, I'm not sure where you're at here, but, if you were, I assume you talk to your auditors and your accountants of whether you have to record like a contingent liability on the fact, usually if you don't know whether your funds are gonna be available to you, that's a contingent issue. If
When-
you were a corporation, you probably have to book it.
If this goes to June 30th, at that point in time, you're correct, you will have to mark to market at June 30th.
And we only mark to market once a year?
It's the only time that you're really producing audited statements.
Well,
Do you produce, I'm just
we have
telling
a
you
couple of
how you,
CPAs
you
here.
know,
I'm not.
pardon me?
But a business does
If you-
their statements quarterly, and they're only audited once a year, and they mark to market on a quarterly basis.
So I'm gonna ask you, what is the potential risk of dollars that the school districts that you serve potentially have up at risk that are sitting non-touchable right now?
Right now, the total value is $2 million.
Out of
all the school
Out of the
districts.
pool of how much?
Out of what pool?
Of all the
That's-
investment funds?
Oh, the investment funds is probably over $200 million we have invested right
So
now.
about 1%?
It's less than 1%.
All right.
And and basically what you're saying, and the reason why I'm saying it is that because I've had this discussion with the attorneys that are handling this for IMED. And I asked this very same question, what is the probability? And I'm gonna give you exactly what they said to me. It's too premature for us to give you a probability of how many of these funds you will or will not receive.
Who told you that?
That was from their attorney. IMET's attorney who's handling the litigation.
Okay, but
Well, I mean,
from our standpoint, from school districts that are budgeting either break even or deficits,
Mm-hmm.
it's important to know that if we're gonna get a call from you and say, oh, by the way, you're gonna lose $200,000, we'd like to know that ahead of time so that we can plan budgeting wise to prepare. So what I'd like to you to send to Tim is roughly what our percent of the
Okay.
2 million is.
okay, that's fine. We can do that.
Because we already have our budget really, it's not, we haven't had the public
And we-
hearing.
Well, if
Our
you-
budget's done by the time your year's over.
Well,
and
but-
God forbid when we get an
Well,
audit
we can
report.
react possibly.
But what I'm saying to you is that what's gonna happen, I would think, and you can talk to Paul Thurman about this, and I've already talked to Paul a little bit about it. Okay, just so you know, Paul is aware of this, because he's our auditor also. And he also didn't feel there was a loss and something should be recorded right now. So our auditors know about this too. It wasn't just a decision that we made by ourselves. Our auditors know about it, the treasurer knows about it, our board knows about it, okay? And right now, if you go ahead and do anything, you're gonna affect this year's budget. Because what I'm saying to you is that June 30th, you will have to mark to market. Whatever happens by June 30th, if we don't get X dollars back, you will have to record the entry. But it's not gonna affect next year's budget, it's gonna affect this year's budget. Because it's gonna be dated before June 30th.
I understand that.
Now,
But
what
it
we're
also, but if there's a loss,
yes,
we're not gonna get the funds.
what's gonna end up happening, I'll tell you right now, Gary, we're gonna book this thing on June 3rd. Let me give you this scenario, how this could play out. Let's say we don't get a dime on June 30th comes. Then you're gonna record, all the districts are gonna record a $2 million loss on their books. And then when the checks start coming back next year, you're gonna start showing gains. You're gonna have some nice fluctuations. What we're hoping is that the significant dollars come in before June 30th. And from what I'm being told from IMET right now, there's been significant dollars seized already, and they're gathering more. So I am just gonna tell you what they tell me. I don't have a dollar value, but what they have said to me is that they've seized significant dollars at this point in time.
Who's
So-
doing the seizing?
Right now, who's doing it right now is the Pennant Management has got hired a firm to go out there and start seizing assets. It's being held by a trustee right now. And the thing is really expanded because they've even got lawsuits now against co-conspirators, and they are seizing assets from them. So, right now, the only thing I'm getting from the information that I'm getting is there's been a significant amount of assets already recovered. Now, what are they worth? We don't know. We're talking hotels, 5 hotels down in Florida in the Orlando area. We're talking property. Now, you can assign a value to it, but until it's sold, that's what it's worth.
Except it's rare in these kind of, and you could read the one in Dixon, any one of Madoff, it's rare that when you start doing the recovery process, everybody gets made whole on these kind of situations.
Tim, I would tend to agree with you, but I think they're doing a very good job trying to seize assets, and they've actually gone out now and gotten co-conspirators.
But this
Us
is,
people.
So
going
this
to
is the
Gary's
kind,
point.
again, this is the kind of communication we want. So if you can then also communicate to Tim so he can disperse it to us, when you say significant amount, what percent of the total pool of the investment pool that's potentially got to be recouped is significant? Because I also read that letter, and that letter says that we attempted to sell those hotels and we didn't get the kind of money we thought we were going to get. So when you
Well-
say significant, we don't know what it is. So when you please get the information, get the dollar amounts. So if the investment pool was 500 million, 5 billion, and they've collected $1 billion, that's significant, but it's not significant to the total pool of investments out there. So when you get that information, pass it on to our financial, so he can pass it on to us.
Okay, but Gary, I'm just wondering, I'm gonna take the value that IMET gives me because I don't know what it's worth until it's sold. So I have to go on what they value it at. I mean, just so you know, like you're saying, if it's 155 million, but then they only get a bid from 72, what is it worth? 72. It's not worth 155, but they could think it's worth 155. But I will pass on whatever they say the value is to you. But the only thing I'm saying to you is, I would take that with a grain of salt, because until it's sold,
Understood. So the total potential
Okay.
loss that IMED had in total, how much assets were collected, have been collected? Recovered.
Right.
I will,
So
I,
we can
Gary,
see
I
the
will, I will,
sense.
I will submit that to IMET and ask them for that information, and whatever they give me, I will be glad to pass on.
And put it in numbers for us. What is our share of the 2 million?
Sure,
And of all the
yeah,
potentially collected funds, what is our share?
right,
That's sitting with a trustee?
okay.
Is everything you're talking about civil court cases?
This is civil.
Okay,
yes.
are you aware of any criminal?
Oh, yes.
Investigations?
There's criminal also against this individual.
Okay, and where is that taking place?
Northern Illinois,
In the Northern Illinois
Northern
District?
Illinois courts. They've had one hearing already.
Has there
Then the
been
next
any-
hearing,
Has there been an indictment?
I believe there has been.
Okay, if you have I don't want to put the name of the individual on TV,
No.
but if you have the name of the individual or the criminal court case number, I mean, that's information that you can pass along, that things are progressing.
Well, and some of this information that we do get from IMED, I usually go back to them and ask if I can disperse it too. I'm not gonna just disperse information because I don't know what.
Don't you have a
I can't-
fiduciary obligation to ours and the other school boards here? You don't have an obligation to IMED, do you?
No, I don't.
But you have a fiduciary obligation, your treasurer does and your board does, to us.
Absolutely.
And what the point people are trying to make is, you finish, we didn't tell us, you finished a report, like keeping us up to date. And if we were busy or not smart enough to have read this or taken the time, we could have waited till June and find out we're gonna take a hit.
No, we wouldn't have waited that
Well,
long.
how do we know? You're
I-
saying that
I
now, you
understand.
were silent on it until we asked questions. What we need is you to go back to the treasurer and say, the duty's to us. We need to be informed. You need to be transparent. We don't wanna do FOIA requests, we don't wanna keep asking. If there's something that marginally seems like it's something we should know, because you serve us, tell us about it. And as Gary's pointing out, update on us on a regular basis.
Tim, I will pass that on to the treasurer.
Ed, do you have anything?
I understand.
I can't talk to that.
Okay.
George, I think some of this goes back to, the board has asked, and I know we had you come out last year, and I think you might even have came out the year before, but, we had sent a couple letters to, I believe it was, you might have been CC'd on them, I believe it was to Mr. Coglanese, just requesting the treasurer's office to consider purchasing a website, just something general enough that we can see our investments, see our monthly statements. Something like this, a simple message could have been put up so that school districts could be kept. The thing that's alarming to the board, the same questions you're facing are the same questions that Tim and I faced 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when we got this third-party communication that, the walls were crumbling around the treasurer's office because of this investment.
Yes.
It obviously appears that maybe it's not as big of a deal as what was brought to our attention, but at that point in time,
You
we're
didn't
getting
know.
it from a third party, we're not getting it from your office.
I
We're not
understand.
getting that you have an attorney, you're working with the attorneys, or you're working with IMED, or things have been seized, or, we
Yes.
don't have nothing.
I understand.
So if you weren't scheduled for here tonight, Tim and I would still be trying to get these answers and relay them again, third-party wise,
Yes.
to the board, so.
No, I understand.
Coming up with some form of communication that we can easily access would be very helpful.
Yeah. Now, and I think I understand, Kevin, and I will definitely communicate that back. I think that's a very valid point. But let me just say one thing too. $2 million is a lot of money, lots of money. But when you look at the general scheme of the cash and investments, it's 0.69% of the cash that we are holding. In other words, it's a little bit more than 0.5%. And what I'm saying is that it is still significant. I'm not downplaying the significance, but it should not affect the operation of the school districts because you're not running your cash positions down to that level, that you only have 0.69% in your bank accounts. But that's not to say that it's not.
But here, let me,
It is.
but you have a collective body here. the RB High School District
Yes.
also has residents that are in Riverside Elementary, are in Brookfield. So on a collective basis, that taxpayer is getting double hit, okay? Not only the amounts of money that we're sitting with the RB investment pool, but you got Riverside's.
Oh,
That-
yes.
So now collectively, that taxpayer is looking at 2 hits,
I
okay?
understand, yes.
All right?
I
So
understand.
don't downplay this to
No,
them.
no, I'm not downplaying.
Especially when we're talking about budgets that are break even, slightly under, slightly over. It's a hit to these, and, you know, taxpayers don't wanna pay any more taxes than they have to.
Gary, I agree with you 100%. It's, every dollar is significant.
And maybe you should go look to see if you can do some cost sharing of this, and maybe look at waiving some of that fee down next year to save.
We're always looking, and we're always open to suggestions. So, I mean, but I'm just saying to you, in that when you look at the totality of where we're at, I mean, and you're absolutely right, because this is affecting over 300 different units of government right now that are involved in this pool.
One more, the other concern is you got a clean audit and you made an investment that didn't meet the investment criteria, right?
Pardon me?
You've gotten a clean audit report. When was this investment made?
This investment was made 18 months ago.
Okay, so last year's audit
Yeah.
said that you met the investment criteria and this one didn't, right?
No, at the time it did.
No, at the time it didn't.
It wasn't discovered to be fraudulent until October of
Well,
this
it
year.
didn't become fraudulent when you found out about it, right? It was fraudulent when you made it, right? If you thought it was backed by the USDA, and it wasn't, is the way you described it.
As their auditors went through it on IMED at that time, they confirmed that it was a good, and it was fine. It wasn't discovered until this audit, June of this year. June of this year.
Whose
their
audit?
IMED's auditors.
Okay.
And Pennant Management auditors, they then discovered it. So if you go back a year prior to that, it wasn't discovered.
We're on the same page.
Okay.
You didn't discover it, but it didn't meet the criteria. It was not backed by the USDA. You didn't know it at the time, or IMED didn't know it at the time.
But what
Did they change the investment after they made it? Not to your knowledge, right?
Not to my knowledge,
Okay,
right.
to your knowledge, the repurchase agreement was believed was backed by the USDA at the time it
At
was
June
made.
30th of 2014, that repurchase agreement, to everyone's knowledge, was within the guidelines and was fine.
So
It
again,
was discovered by their auditors as they confirmed it, doing the June 30th, 2014 statements.
you're helping, I understand that now.
Okay?
So at the time the investment was made, it didn't meet the investment criteria. The people didn't even discover it until after an audit was made a year later. Your own auditor said you met the investment criteria, but you didn't. So the bigger concern to me is, what if this happens with a larger investment or more investments? Or what if they're not auditing all of them and there's other investments out there that don't
Well,
meet the
I think
requirements?
what had happened is that our auditors were relying on the auditors from IMET and Pennant, that they validated that these were legitimate investments.
Well, that's the real problem.
Absolutely, that's the real
So,
problem.
I mean, the bottom line is, when I heard the speech, an audit was done and found out that these things weren't valid. Well, shouldn't somebody have checked that they were valid before we spent the money? I mean,
Yes,
that's the
that's
bottom.
the point.
Ed, you took the words right out of my
Okay,
mouth.
well-
When I discovered this, that was the first question I said to IMET when I got the letter from them. I picked up the phone, it was the first question I said to them.
I mean, stop doing
What
business
did
with these
Pennant
guys.
Management do?
But
Well, Pennant Management relied that they were a USDA-approved lender. So what?
Well, the concern I have with it
Why
is,
weren't the loans approved? by
Listen,
the
this has
USDA?
been going on forever. A few years ago, remember all those repurchase agreements? Yeah, they're valid investments. Only if there's something underneath. And it's happened with alleged Home Depot and you remember that guy in Minnesota, 18 million bucks?
Yes.
So, we should not be dealing with anybody that's not checking before they put their money in it.
Well, that's the reason why maybe I'm feeling a little bit confident that we will recover all the money, because
I just hate-
I can't imagine.
Listen, I'm a lawyer, I don't like the litigation process, and I know ultimately, lawyers take chunks of money here, we're not gonna get buck for buck, it's just not gonna happen.
So
There will probably be some cost.
And I'm not
you're-
talking about this particular one, I'm talking about litigation in general.
Right, right.
And the point is, we have a lack of, I personally can't speak for the majority of the board, I have a lack of confidence, even the way you explain it. Made an investment we shouldn't have made. We caught it almost by mistake, the way you described it, and the question I have is, what if there's more investments like that out there?
Kevin, when could we get an update on this?
The board meets again in January. We meet every 2 weeks, George, so if you can, Tim can reach out to you the week before the meetings and try to get updates from you on this. And you can provide us,
So
We'll
can I ask
No,
I'll
not-
be out of town.
or at least a written statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to come.
It's not that you have to be here, but if we could have
Sure.
regular updates on the
I will
case.
try to get that information that Gary's mentioning, that, from IMET. I'll go back tomorrow and try to get it.
Just send me an email.
So-
And I'll send Tim an email.
So I had thought always that you guys used for lack of a better word, a broker to go invest in treasuries. But it sounds to me you went and abdicated your investment to IMET, who it has a body of people running, and they go and use investment people.
They hire-
So you added a different layer, another layer, as opposed to go directly to a brokerage and say, okay, I've invested in U.S. Treasuries. You went to IMET, which is basically another overhead organization that pools money together, who then goes out with a group of people who are hired by IMET to go to a broker to buy things. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you
That's what IMET
abdicated
did.
your direct buying authority to go to a third party who then goes to the broker, as opposed to you guys directly going, building a relationship with JP Morgan or whomever it is. You abdicated that to go to IMET. And now you're relying on IMET's investment people to go, and they're hopefully hiring the correct relationships, as
Well-
opposed to you directly getting face-to-face with the relationship brokers, whoever, who will go and buy U.S. Treasuries or whatever.
That's
It
the
sounds
way
to me
the
we can do the same thing. If you're abdicating that authority, if you're abdicating that role, we can do the same thing.
Well, you're right. I mean, that's the way the system works. IMET did hand it off to a third party, an investment advisor. They did. And the problem here is that they didn't follow through on what they were supposed to do and follow the IMET investment policy and confirm a loan. I mean, gentlemen, to buy $50 million worth of loans and not confirm them, I mean, it's basic. I mean, it's basic. I mean, that's the only reason why I'm saying to you, when this happened, I cannot believe that when push comes to shove here, and it probably will come to that, we're gonna get the money back. Because there's a number of insurance policies, fidelity bonds, lawsuits this is just the beginning. I mean, after they're done with this individual, if we don't get all the money back, then the next step is they're going after Pennant Management, the investment advisor, for the difference. And if we don't get the money back after that, we then will go after IMET for whatever's left.
Kevin, could we get an update at the next board meeting on this, whatever
Sure.
it takes, maybe with the finance committee or whatever? It's a somewhat complicated topic.
Yep.
And maybe we could just have a summary. I think the key is, what are we at risk?
So what we'll do, George, is that Tim will within every 10 days, will contact you for an
Okay.
update of information and share that information with the board.
Sure. And just to be clear, Gary, what you're looking for, because I'm gonna get on the phone tomorrow with IMET on this. What we're totally at risk and what Riverside Brookfield would be at risk.
Okay.
Is that your question? I want to make sure I'm clear on it.
Yes.
Because
I
I'm
wanna
gonna get
know
on the
what
phone
our
tomorrow
potential
and try to get
our
this.
exposure is,
Okay.
yes.
Okay?
Mike?
So just a little short factual summary. There's a $50 million investment through this company, not all of it is through your treasurer's office?
Yes.
Your treasurer's office is $2 million,
Right.
of which you're gonna tell us what our share of that 2
Yes,
million is.
if I'm understanding it correctly.
And then you're gonna find out if in fact money has been collected and is in the hands of a trustee
What's its value?
as compared to our share of the 2 million, so we can see a difference.
Yes.
In general, what I see at this treasurer's office that I've been here, this is in my 6th year now, is it's like a black hole. You know, our bank account holds less than $100,000 that we actually control through our business office.
Yes, sir.
He can correct me yes or no if I'm right or wrong. And the rest, up to $20 million at a time, sits with the treasurer's office. And we write and approve checks, and then they're paid out from you.
Yes.
And when our constituents want information from us, we've updated our website. I've called our website a few years back a third world nation. I don't think your nation's even on the map because you guys have nothing out there for any of the public who would like to see where their money is through us to you. Do you even exist? This is the modern age. Everything's on the internet. You ought to get in line with that and send that word up. I know you're hearing us. Because what do we have with you? No one in the public can sit there in the middle of the night after watching this broadcast and tell themselves, hey, this black hole has how much of our taxpayer money. So that's the communication thing, to get a website and get it out there and get your audit reports up there and do the things that we've done here to filter down to our taxpayers. The second thing, which I thought I was going to ask from the very beginning, was I think it's fundamentally unfair the way you allocate expenses. We happen to get an $8.9 million check that's been sitting there for the most part, and we're going to get tagged a percentage of that money as to all the money that came in. Our $8.9 million is going to put us over a bigger percentage than all the other school districts who are writing checks, basically, or investing money. So our $8.9 million is going to make us have a higher weight as to how you allocate the expenses. Perhaps you ought to figure out how much the expenses are to write checks, because you have people write checks, you have software, you have bank fees, you have the cost of the checks, you have all that expense, and each school district writes so many checks. And you ought to allocate it on what's actually going, you ought to consider allocating it on what's actually happening. How many checks did this school district write? How many checks did this school district write? How many checks did this school district write? So when we had our referendum in '06, we had a ton of money come in that sat there for a while to improve the building, and we got tagged with a big expense because we just happened to have extra money to do construction. I think construction money ought to be treated differently than just lumping all the money together. We ought to have like lumping all the tax money that comes in, all the federal grant money that comes in, all the money that comes in for operating expenses, and we ought to separately consider construction money. Because unfairly, we were expecting a $50,000 bill that year, and we got hit with $80,000 or $90,000 unexpectedly because we just happened to have bond money come in and sit there for a while until we paid out once a month the general contractor. I think that's fundamentally unfair that the treasurer's office operates like that. And I just want you to take that back with you, and we'll bring it up next time you come because, sure.
George and I have discussed the $8.9 million, and even though it's recorded on our books as revenue, George has already said that that's not
It's
gonna
not
be part of the
included, it's not included in
allocation
revenue for the
expenses
distribution of
this year.
expenses, not bond sales.
And when I was here in 5 years ago, we got hit with this enormous bill. And the answer that came back to us was, well, you got all this bond money in here. And we tagged you on that is basically what
George,
it came
wasn't our
back for.
bill though last year 80,000?
Yes.
And wasn't that because we got the check for 8.9
No,
million?
what happened last year is because you changed the recognition of your property tax revenue.
So
It went to
same,
full accrual.
same difference.
Same difference.
It was no extra work for you.
Yeah,
We
but
changed
that's-
an
but that-
accounting method.
no, I understand
And we
what
got
you're
billed
saying.
$40,000
But-
for it.
So
That's-
did we, by us doing that, did you give the benefit to other school districts?
that I get the benefit.
Yeah.
Right, our numerator
We
went
had to
up
pick
on the
the revenue,
denominator.
and it'd be consistent the way we record revenues and the way we distribute the expense. So if you're saying, did you get dinged more because you went to a full accrual? Yes.
Yes. we
And the
did.
other school district got
Some of
charged
them,
less.
some of them did go to full accrual, some didn't.
No,
Now
so-
more,
So what I'm saying to you is, say your operating budget's $1 million, right?
Yes.
And you have the, whatever, the 10 school districts, I don't know what the number is, right? And each of them have a certain percent. And you still go to the budgeted expenses. To, all right, so your 14 are allocated out to get to the $1 million. And you look at the revenues coming in and you charge a percent to get to the $1 million.
Yes, that's
So if one year, 208 decides to go to full accrual, you're not gonna go and charge everyone $1.4 million. What you're gonna do is keep it at $1 million, you're gonna ding us, and then you're gonna take the other districts and they're gonna get charged less.
Yeah,
yes, that's the way it will work.
So we were nice enough to give the other school districts a break in your fee.
yeah, our numerator
Yes.
went up disproportionately.
But you also got more interest income because the revenue was now accrued and bigger.
Yeah, but they're
Your
not
revenue
related.
went up, right? Your revenue went up. I recorded more revenue. So
So
you got more
what?
interest income.
So if we.
I'm just saying, you
So
can't-
if we,
you
re-
can't-
so if we
When read this
record,
stuff, that's, we say, what's the logic, so what? So yeah, we had more money, we got more interest.
should go up.
It should go up. If it wasn't going up, we'd be here having a different conversation.
I agree.
But our interest, what does the fact that we gave you more money and our interest revenue go up have to do with our expenses going
I
up?
mean, I'll look this up, but I think by statute, that's the way the expenses need to be distributed by revenue. I think it's written in the statute, but I will check it.
and your office is mandated by statute.
Yes.
And
So-
you know,
So we're here.
But I will double check it,
So
but
we're
I'm pretty
here,
sure.
14 school districts are mandated to put our millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars in the black hole with no website.
and you know what, George, this is not your fault. I mean, you're trying to do your job. But the statute dates back to 1819.
Oh, I agree.
All right, and we do have computers now. We do have many ways that things can be consolidated. And I look at the mission statement to provide efficient, consolidated financial services. And yes, you're consolidating this group, but why do we have to have 12 treasurers? You know, that to me is the crux of the issue here.
Why aren't you guys taking the lead and saying this law is out of date, out of whack? We don't allocate expenses right. There's no reason to have however many you said there are in the county. It's ridiculous.
Not trying to put people out of a job.
Cook
but-
County's
No, I
supposed,
understand.
Cook County has 12, why? We have to. When we raise our expenses, we might not be able to hire a teacher. Okay, if we lose, it's only $2 million, if 10%'s ours, that's 200,000. That's 2 teachers, maybe 3 teachers for us. So why aren't you guys taking the lead? Ronner wants to do it, you can go talk to him and say, even if the treasurer makes any sense, there's no reason to have 12 township treasurers. We can modernize, put them all together and run it, instead of having however many you have for 12, you consolidate some of it.
Tim, I think that discussion's been underway a couple times already.
You guys.
I'm not saying,
We'll take a vote.
we did
have to-
it, but I'm just saying that
How
it's been
do we
under
get-
discussion.
Well, let me ask a different question. So you have a board. I think, was there some of the school districts on your board?
No, no school district.
So how do we go to you to say, we want you to represent us, we want you to take the lead and do something about this arcane system that it's not working? We want you to take the lead and communicate to us. We don't want to have to beg and get in front of cameras and grill somebody for 50 minutes on something. If you sent us a simple report, we would have finished a half hour ago. How do we do that?
I think you've just done it.
Well, why? You're not the decision maker. There's a board you have
I
to follow.
can communicate it. Tim, that's all I can do right now is communicate it. I'm listening to what you're saying and what Gary's saying, and I'm gonna try to get you the information that you need, and I will communicate that.
Well,
But I think you
do you have
understand
open-
that I am not the board.
Oh, well, let's even tell
and
us this much. How
I-
often do you have public meetings for your board?
Pardon me?
How often is your
Quarterly.
board? Quarterlies?
Yes.
And do you give notice, like, to the members? Do we get a notice on that?
No,
I don't know if you get noticed,
I
but it
mean-
is posted.
You
no,
don't-
but it's posted just on your office wall.
So
Yes.
you don't have a website. How do we know there's a board meeting so we can send a representative and tell them, and we'll contact the other 13 boards and say, are you guys on board with us let's all send the memo over there and make sure they know this isn't working. I mean, you don't even send us, you don't even have a duty to send us a public notice that you're having a meeting? We have to do it? And I'm not saying there's something wrong with us doing it. Every public agency has to send public notices or post them on their website. You only have 14 members, and you don't even send us a notice when you're having a public meeting that affects
So
us?
what is the date of your quarterly meetings? Is it a set second Tuesday
It's
of
usually,
the?
it's usually the third Monday of every quarter.
Okay.
April, July, October.
Tim, could you get those dates and then communicate that to us?
Kevin, maybe
And the
this,
location, since I
I'd
don't know
suggest
where you
something
guys are
even
even
a step
located.
further. I'd like to see if a majority of the board feels we should direct the superintendent to contact, or have Kevin direct him, to contact his counterparts at the 14-member schools, see if we're all on the same page, and send a member to the next public meeting, and articulate what we see as problems here that need to be addressed.
Kevin, can you bring this up at the finance committee, or
Right,
just
we could
discuss
also
these
take-
options?
Discuss that in January to Cal, when we have
Yeah.
more of our board
That's
members
right.
here.
That's fine, too.
Seems like everybody went to the bathroom.
Right, I mean, we can't,
You know, we gotta stop talking.
there's,
Yeah.
right, there's structural issues here with the state law.
John,
And,
we can't continue our meeting unless we have 4 members.
oh, that's right.
You're gonna have to hold it for a minute.
Okay. We need 4 for a quorum. So did you think, well,
Can we let George go?
I think George wants to go.
Yeah, I think.
I don't see much.
You got it?
Yeah, I think.
I think we need some
All right,
information, George. by
Yeah,
next
no,
week.
I understand what Gary wants, and I understand what Mike about the website. So I think those are the two primary information items. I just want to make sure I've got.
And I
what-
also want the big picture, how much
I understand.
that investment house had under its management, how much assets are recovered.
Yes, I understand what your
Okay,
question.
that's
I think,
also-
and when I send it, if it isn't what you want, please
Yeah,
tell.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, no, just
Yes, I will.
tell him. And
He knows
Tim-
I will, yes.
That's okay, that's
All
fine.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
George,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have to call it recess?
Recess?
We're good, George. Thank you.
All right, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go get him, Bob.
Sorry, guys.
I left first.
I know.
I
Well-
forgot we didn't have enough people.
Tim, what's
So
that?
did
No, we're good. So
We're good.
Tim, we're back in
We're-
session. We never left session.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay.
So Tim will follow up with with George prior to the cow, and part of his report, he'll update, I think we should leave this under discussion items.
Yep.
Just to say, here's what we got, here's what we didn't get. The concerning thing, I think, is the webpage. I mean, we don't even know when there is a meeting. We
This
don't
whole
know-
thing is concerning, Kevin.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't know who the
I mean,
public
I-
elected officials are.
And I'm not even talking about this laws. I'm just concerned about the way this whole thing functions. It's ridiculous.
Kevin, is this something maybe our representative, we could bring him here and, or ask him if he'd like to come and voice our
There
concerns?
is Lyons Township is going through this right now. They put in a couple bills. We sit on, if the board remembers this discussion, I might have forwarded it through a weekly update. Being a part of LADSI is a part, our special ed cooperative that we are a part of, is a part of the Lyons Township. And Lyons Township High School is working with their state rep on trying to get bills proposed that would give school districts the right to break away from the treasurer's office a little, or even look into banish the treasurer's office. So I could follow up with their superintendent and find out how that's going and what course of action they're taking. But I remember, we're going back now, the board asked me 2 years ago to start writing letters, and we did, to say, we don't even know when your meetings are.
And they ignored the letters.
And we never got any response, we never even got a response.
We may need a different approach then.
The other follow-up that I would like, whether we just ask now or agenda item at the end is, let's get them to do reports that have all the information.
So if you think there's something that's missing, we
I've
can-
said it 50 times. There's 5 or 6 columns of codes, and, well, you know what, next time we go over the expense, you can look. If you look at them, sometimes there's 30 items that say exactly the same thing, because all the codes aren't described in the reports.
Okay. Are you familiar with?
Yeah, those are, the reports that we get are the standard reports that they issue.
In the
We've got-
relativity, we would have to have someone from our office key in,
They said they
not
would do
necessarily
it.
rekey,
The-
but
the
you'd have to
budget that we
format
pro-
it.
The budget that we produce is done through relativity.
So we were able to format that. So,
What you might be asking for is printing data that doesn't currently exist,
It's possible.
as
He said-
opposed to
I'd like to know
printing
that.
data that
Well,
we
you know
have
what,
in a
let's,
different
let's,
format.
you put together what you want.
Okay.
Take the
We
Jan-
can bring their programming expert in here to, if we need to call them in, to sit down and tell us this is what we want, and we want a commitment from them.
take
Fine.
the January cow one and circle the ones, I know you've asked this before, but let's take a page off of that cow and just let's circle one page.
I'll highlight one when we go over the bills
Yeah,
today.
and then we can see what we
Okay.
can do, sure.
There are a lot of good questions on that.